Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. The bye week is gone. It's now Monday, not Tuesday, but now we're going into Wednesday. And it's crazy to think that we're already almost another day closer to the Thursday night football at Acrisure Stadium when Pitt takes on the Syracuse Orange, which is today a rivalry game. And I can tell you this, there was a great conversation we saw today from the press briefing with Pat Narduzzi, which is traditionally his Thursday press briefing officially on a Tuesday, because obviously with a game on a Thursday night and a Syracuse Orange coming to town. We'll go into today about the breakdown, score predictions, but also two players to watch. As this game is going to be really fun to watch. Pitt is 6-0, Syracuse 5-1. This will be a really good matchup overall when it comes to Pitt. Obviously, you guys know the deal. Before we get started, the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Again, anytime you can support a small business, especially, too, when it comes from two great Pitt men, anytime you can support them, I suggest you do so. But more importantly, how they treat people, their customer service, but also the amount of selection they have in their stores, whether it's their light beers, their heavier lagers. Also, too, you have the Icy Light Corporation, obviously has done a great job with the Pitt logo on their can. That thing's flying up the shelves. Colonial Beer has updated and has restocked for all the Pitt fans coming up on that Thursday tailgate after work. I'll certainly be walking my way over from my office. But obviously, too, anytime you can support them, the Fake Slide Pilsner also is currently there, which helps support paying the players and helps support Alliance 412, which is a preferred collective of the University of Pittsburgh. Guys, again, go see my friends at Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. And, of course, the show also has a new sponsor by Thompson Law Group and Brian Thompson, an attorney on your side. Right now, with many people struggling with the economy and rising costs, they're helping many people and businesses with their debts, and they're offering a free telephone consultation to assess all options available to those who are struggling, no matter the type of amount of debt they are currently in. You can reach out to them at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Guys, again, I am a diehard Brian Thompson guy because, one, I ask him all of my personal questions, especially, two, when it comes to any questions with law. The one thing that's great about Brian, if he can't answer your questions, he'll put you in the right direction with someone else because he cares about the individuals he serves, the clientele. At larger law firms, you're looked at as a number. With Brian, you're not a number. You're an individual, and your results matter on what you're looking to get done with your cases. Overall, Brian's a great individual. I've known him since I was a kid. Comes from a great family, has a great family, and does tremendous work in the community. Anytime you can deal with a guy like Brian Thompson, but more importantly, a Pitt alum as well, you can never go wrong. You can only go right with Brian Thompson. Again, visit Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson. It's 724-799-8404 or visit him at thompsonattorney.com. It's always good to have a show sponsored by two great Pitt men. I can tell you that. It's always good to have that on there. But let's get into the real fun stuff of the night. The preview between Pitt and Syracuse. Obviously, it's kind of crazy. It feels like forever since the last time. Obviously, all the Pitt fans watching right now, it feels like a while since we last played. I think probably Syracuse fans would probably feel the same way with now both teams going to a bye week. Pitt was able to really get 8 practices in towards this game because of that bye week to get practices during the off week. Syracuse would probably, if I had to guess, probably got their practices in as well. And you look at a Syracuse team right now, 5-1. They've done a really good job up to this point. Fran Brown, a first-year head football coach at Syracuse, comes via the University of Georgia, was a defensive backs coach there, was never a coordinator. But when you look at the way he coaches and how he coaches, he does a tremendous job on a day in and day out basis, especially too with that SEC mindset. Obviously, Pat Narduzzi now and again in his 10th straight year at the University of Pittsburgh. The bounce back again, and we've talked about guys just going from 3-9 now to 6-0 on the verge of having a potential opportunity to go 6-0. And really, at this point, we can talk about it now, halfway through the season, competing for a college football playoff spot coming up in January. Obviously, guys, as you can imagine, when you go to this overall matchup, it's pretty good when you come to look at it. Obviously, when you look at, first off, before we go into Syracuse, guys, I'm going to go into a refresher Pitt versus Cal, the last game that we currently had, especially on the schedule at Acrisure Stadium. You look at Eli Holstein, was not his best day. Overall, he was 14 to 28 for 133 yards, only a 4.8 average, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, which was very rare for a guy like Eli Holstein, who's really done a really good job overall all year long. Really played 5 tremendous games with 300 yards passing in each one of those games, 3 touchdowns in each one of those games. But overall, when you look at him, I expect him to bounce back in this football game. I think this is a great opportunity for him. But more importantly, I think when you look at the game against Cal, to be able to go into a bye week, look at all the mistakes that you made in that game, to come back out, brush it off. And as Pat Narduzzi talked about today, really brushed it off throughout the week and just was really dialed into the tape, the game tape of what he was able to do previously, what he was doing well, but also looking at the game tape against Cal when you look and see what did he do right and what did he do wrong. And I think in terms of what Cal, what did the offense really do wrong that kind of sputtered? And again, Cade Bell is a certain guy, especially to the offensive coordinator, who has really done a good job week to week making adjustments to what he needs to do to be successful. And we're certainly going to need that this week, guys, because Syracuse is a damn good football team. They play at a high level. They've certainly played tough the entire year. The only loss was a real slip up at home against Stanford. Obviously, Stanford not doing well this year. It's really a rebuilding year for them. Coach Traylor at Stanford's really done a good job of really getting the guys in there he needs, but he's still a year away from really competing in the ACC. Very much a lot different than what it was in the Pac-12. Again, Eli Holstein, guys, you can imagine Desmond Reed still doing a great job. And he had 16 carries for 120 yards in his previous game against Cal. Daniel Carter had 2 carries for 23 yards. Rodney Hammond got some touches in that game. I expect those guys to continue to get their touches within these games. And of course, obviously, guys, Kanate Mumfield had 3 catches for 37 yards. Kenny Johnson, 4 catches for 34 yards. Gavin Bartholomew really did a good job in this game. 3 catches, 29 yards. Desmond Reed had a catch. Obviously, that 4th down catch was really good overall. And then Raphael Poppy Williams had 2 catches, 12 yards. And then Jake Overman, 1 catch for 2 yards. And then in that game, too, quick recap on the defense. Overall, Fernando Mendoza only threw for 272 yards, 27 of 37 for how many times he dropped back. Only 1 touchdown pass, no interceptions. Javian Thomas had 17 carries for 72 yards. They really kept him in check. Really, the first game overall, besides the first drive, we talked about this before, the Pitt defense played a damn good football game, only giving up 15 points. I think they did a really good job overall, under 300 yards passing, under 100 yards rushing overall in the game because of sacks and whatnot going through. They had 63 total yards, but we look at the starters, 17 carries for 72 yards. Pitt did a good job keeping him in check. When it comes to Syracuse players to watch, obviously the most notable one on offense, Kyle McCord. Every game he has played this year, Fran Brown talked about it. The head football coach at Syracuse said, really thanking Ohio State for allowing him to get out of their grasp, transfer from Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State right now taking a loss to Oregon. I think, when it comes to Howard, I think he's done an okay job, hasn't done a great job. I think Kyle McCord was doing a really good job there. Has just continued that at Syracuse, 31 of 42 2 weeks ago, 346 yards passing, 8.2 average, had 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So he's doing a really good job of keeping the ball out of harm's way and really being selective on what he does going forward in terms of not putting the ball into harm's way. He's done that previously in a couple games. He's had a couple slip-ups, but overall, he's done a really good job. So 346 yards passing. He's now every single game this year. 6 games has thrown for over 300 yards, a lot like Eli Holstein, but Eli didn't have the last one, obviously, against Cal. Another player to watch on offense, Lakeith Allen, the starting running back for the Syracuse Orange, 21 carries 2 weeks ago for 91 yards, a 4.3 average, 1 touchdown, had a run for 21 yards. Really was a big-time rush for them. Dan Villari, he's still there. You guys can imagine him last year. Pitt did not do a good job out of the Wildcat. He was a former quarterback. Ended up being a tight end, moving to tight end, but now they have him really playing tight end, but they use him as almost like an H-back to where he can really run as well. Potentially maybe see a little bit of that Wildcat because the one that did a really good job last year. But the really good thing about Pitt this year, it's a completely different defense, and Pitt has continued to get better. I really expect Pitt to take that next stride to where they really pick up where they left off. Hopefully we don't see that first drive out of the game again where it looked sloppy, it looked horrible on defense. But after that first drive, Pitt's defense played lights out for the rest of the game. But I got to watch in the run game Lakeith Allen, Dan Villari, but also too Yasin Willis. If you can imagine, you're probably wondering, that name sounds familiar. He's a guy that was committed to Pitt for a number of months. Fran Brown took the job after he left Georgia, took the job at Syracuse. He goes on campus for one visit, and then really just decommitted from Pitt and went there. Obviously, a New Jersey kid, it makes sense for him to go there. Fran Brown did a really good job of convincing him to leave Pitt and go there. So I got to watch there. So really, LaKeith Allen, Dan Villari, and Yassin Willis in terms of the run game, what they're able to do. And then we go to the passing game, guys to watch out for. Jackson Meeks, man, this is going to be the overall number one guy when it comes to the passing game for Syracuse. He's had a really good season overall. He's their leading reception and overall total yardage. Jackson Meeks 2 weeks ago had 11 receptions for 116 yards against NC State. And their 24-17 win down in Raleigh, 11 catches, 116 yards, 10.5 average, one touchdown reception. Also, Trevor Pena, he's been there for a couple of years, eight receptions for 75 yards, 9.4 average. Really good wide receiver overall. And you can imagine, you're throwing for over 300 yards a game. You got some damn good wide receivers. Aronde Godson, the second, 6 receptions for 74 yards, 12.3 average. Those are really the top 3 guys that Pitt's going to need to watch out for in this game. Again, Jackson Meeks is really their number one wide receiver. He's done a really good job all year long. Finds ways to create separation. I think he's a great route runner, a guy who's physical, especially too in a Pitt quarters defense. Pitt's corners like Rylan Gandy, Timon Lyman, and then obviously Rashad Battle got to be really in a good position, be tough off the line of scrimmage to where they're really getting them off their routes to really mess up the timing to allow Pitt's defensive line to really create pressure. So those are really 3 guys to watch there. And then when overall comes to their defensive style of play, again, this is a defense where they're really starting to take on Fran Brown's defensive style of football. Again, only have 17 points this past week to NC State. Justin tackles, 8 tackles overall, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. Deuce Chestnut, 7 tackles, 5 solo. Derek McDonald, he's had a good year overall, 7 tackles, 2 solo. And then obviously Elijah Clark, 4 tackles, 3 overall. So they got some really good guys on defense. Again, I think overall, when you look at their schedule, week by week, I mean, they've done a good job. Now, have they faced really anybody, outrageous? I mean, the people talk about their schedule, why they're not ranked. Me personally, in my AP top 25, for when it comes to, Jason Watkins show, the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast, I have Syracuse ranked. I have Pitt a little bit higher at 16 because of how they played and the teams they face out of the Big 12. They faced multiple Power 4 teams. I've had Syracuse ranked this past week at 24. I think they deserve to be ranked 5-1, especially over a team like an Army. I don't think Army's faced enough teams. Also, a Boise State. I don't think Boise State should be in there. I think just Syracuse has really done enough to be ranked. Obviously, SMU's up there. I had them up there as well. But, I have a lot of respect for Syracuse because I think they've done a really good job up to this point. The only one slip up to where potentially it's probably the reason why they're not ranked. If it was a different loss to a different team, I think they're probably ranked right now, is the Stanford Cardinals. They lost to Stanford at home. They probably shouldn't have lost that game. Stanford's having a really tough year overall, especially 2 at home. They probably shouldn't have lost that game at home. I think they've really made some corrections out of that game. But overall, Syracuse 5-1, 2-1 overall in the conference. So when it comes to these players, again, I think overall when it comes to the quarterback battle, you got to watch these 2 guys overall. You got Eli Holstein, who's really done a really good job all year long besides one game, man. I think, me personally, when you watch the game tape and you watch how this guy is, the Bubba Yaga mindset, going after guys, he's certainly not scared of anybody, doesn't think twice about looking at anybody. He's a guy, I think he's really going to brush it off and really show up this week again, understanding the mistakes that he made, but also, too, the other side of the coin, this is the best quarterbacks Pitt's faced all year long, Kyle McCord. I think he's going to come out ready to play. Obviously, in their matchups overall, Syracuse has not scored a lot of points overall on the majority of their games. Obviously, UNLV, they went to overtime, scored 44 points in that game, won that game 44-41. They did a good job in that game. And then they also had another game overall. I'm trying to think. I had it in my notes here. They had one more game where they really scored a lot of points. So overall, they can certainly put up points if they need to, but the majority of their games are a lot closer than what people think. I think this game overall, when it comes down to matchups, again, the wide receivers, I think in the running back position, obviously Pitt's Desmond Reed. I expect him to have another game than what he usually does, especially too in the run game. When it comes to matchups on the offensive line, I love the offensive line for Pitt. I don't think Branson Taylor will be back anytime soon. I think Terrence Enos will be starting at left tackle. Ryan Jacoby, I'm not sure if he's going to be back yet. So we'll see if Jackson Brown moves into that position of backup guard. He can be a swing tackle or swing guard. We'll see if he can play at the guard position or if it's Jason Collier. If I had to put my money on it, I'm probably putting Jason Collier there. You look at these two teams up front at the line, the point of attack. Their O-lines, I'll tell you what, Syracuse O-line, I think is pretty damn good. They've done a good job overall all year long. I think they're more physical up front on the offensive side than the defensive side. So we'll see if Pitt can actually establish a run game, because I think that for Pitt to win this game, they really need to establish a little bit of a run game. You saw this past week where they weren't able to establish it, focused on the pass. Fran Brown, a defensive guy, man, especially too Robinson, the defensive coordinator, comes up here from Texas A&M. He did a phenomenal job at Texas A&M, coached at Penn State as well, the defensive line there. I think he's a damn good defensive coordinator. I expect the two safeties to really play back the majority of the first portion of the game. If Pitt can establish that run and get them to come up into the box, I think Pitt can really get those one-on-one battles where you've got Kanate Mumfield down the seam. You've got Kenny Johnson down the field. You're able to run curl routes, especially two post patterns, and then you're able to work in a guy like a Dejon Reynolds, Raphael Poppy Williams, C.J. Lee, and obviously you're a really big target, Gavin Bartholomew, which I think really did a lot better job in that game this past 2 weeks ago against Cal. I really think he can have a big potential game this week. But also too, I'm going to throw it out there, and again, I've said it before, and I'll say it again: the atmosphere at Acrisure Stadium is really going to be an aspect of this game that I think is going to help Pitt football. And I think it's done it overall. I've talked to a number of these players. They talk about how the overall atmosphere is huge in terms of games and the energy it brings. You saw it in the Cal game. They talked about it. They loved it. They couldn't believe how great the crowd was for the people that were there. I'm telling you, the crowd noise matters. And I got to give right now a shout out to the Panther Pit. The Panther Pit all year long has been phenomenal. Saw they were in the quad this morning. They were answering, doing a trivia in the quad. Obviously, Pat Narduzzi brought in some free pizza as well. But overall, when you look at the Panther Pit, man, I love their overall energy. I love the fact that the way that they show up the past 5 years, the Panther Pit has been second to none. I just got to give a shout out to them, man. I think that they've done a tremendous job. They bring so much mojo. They bring so much energy, especially too when you're in Acrisure Stadium and on the scoreboard right as soon as before kickoff hits off, and you hear the announcer over the PA system in Acrisure Stadium. And they say, now let's welcome the Panther Pit. It's truly energetic. It gets the crowd going. It gets the players going. So shout out to the Panther Pit. We're going to need them against the Syracuse Orange. We're going to need them for the rest of the year as well. Whether it's Virginia, Clemson, it doesn't matter who we're facing. We're going to need them the rest of the year. So really shout out to the Panther Pit for doing a hell of a job this year, even this past 2 weeks ago against Cal. Tremendous job. Even during a holiday, fall break, those guys and girls still showed up. So thank you to the Panther Pit for busting your ass. We'll see you on Thursday. So shout out to them. Overall, atmosphere is going to be huge. Again, quarterback matchup is going to be huge. Which quarterback makes the least amount of mistakes? Who really puts their team on their back? I think obviously too, establishing the run. We talked about Lakeem Allen. The Pitt defense, number 2, they need to stop the run. That's going to be a consistent theme throughout the entire year. One is how the Pitt offense responds. Number 2, stopping the run. The defense needs to stop the run and play what they have like this past game. We talked about all year, Pitt's done a great job of creating pressure, but finishing the play. Against Cal, they had pressure. They finished the play. They had 6 sacks in that game. If Pitt can find a way to get 4 to 6 sacks in this game, that's going to lead to a major, major efficiency in terms of being able to win this football game. But number 3, the turnover battle. The turnover battle is going to be good to where whoever wins the turnover battle will win this football game. I can't tell you, when you look at these two teams, they've been really in terms of being smart with the football, not being overgenic to where they're putting the ball out there in harm's way. And I think whoever wins the turnover battle will also win the football game. Last but not least, special teams. We always talk about Better Call Saul. Ben Saul's a guy who he's 10 for 10 this year in field goals. I think special teams, we saw it early on in the year. We saw it especially against West Virginia, block punt, getting that in there. But also too, just Ben Saul's has been incredible. 55 plus yard field goals. Hit a 57 yarder against Cal. We saw how Cal lost that game by not hitting a field goal. Caleb Junko's got to have himself a hell of a day. If we got to send a guy out there to punt, he can't be, he's got to be on his game, especially too, being able to ping guys deep down in the Syracuse zone. Overall, guys, when it comes to the score of this football game, I think that the way these two teams are playing, they're damn good. They're damn good football teams. I think overall this will be a tighter game than what people think. I think Pitt's going to win this football game 34-24. I think it's going to be a 10-point game. I think it's going to be close. I think maybe Pitt hits a field goal towards the fourth quarter that gets it to a 10-point lead. But I've got Pitt winning this football game at Acrisure Stadium at 7:30 on a Thursday night under the lights, under prime time, with Matthew Berry and Dan Mullen coming to town. I think Pitt wins this football game 34-24. Pitt fans, I want to hear your overall thoughts. What are your keys to watching this game? Who do you think wins this game? Syracuse fans, I want to hear your thoughts. Who do you think wins this game? And who are players that maybe we didn't talk about that you have to think they'll be a major factor in this football game? Guys, the show continues to be the best of the best because of you guys. Subscribe and like the video. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, helps the algorithm. Share it with your friends, and comment down in the comment section. I want to hear your thoughts. Who are players to watch? Who do you think wins? And regardless of both teams, who are players that you want to see step up in this football game? Guys, as always and forever, hail to Pitt and hail to the ACC. I'll see you guys next time.